Alright, welcome back everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, it's the Exporter Sports Talk Show live on Raw Radio. And in case you missed all of the show or you're joining us for the first time, you want to make sure to join us each and every Wednesday at 6 p.m. right here on Raw Radio. We'll be giving you the most in-depth analysis and breakdown for all NFL and fantasy football for 2014. Now, we're going to move on and just talk about some trending and relevant topics that's going on right now in fantasy football as we're in the second week of the preseason, just a couple weeks away now from the start of the kickoff. All right, so Cam Newton, look, we spoke on him a couple times before. I really am just going to be interested to see what type of numbers he can put up this year. Newton is always rated as a top 10 quarterback, but he had ankle surgery in the offseason. He has a brand new cast of wide receivers that he's passing the football to. And the running game is not that effective, especially since they lost all-pro tackle Jordan Gross. And so I am just going to be really anxious to see what type of fantasy football numbers that Cam Newton puts up this year. I don't have him ranked as high as I normally do. Next week we'll be covering our quarterback, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think this is a big year for Cam Newton because we're going to see exactly how good of a passer that he is. This Carolina Panthers offense does not look explosive. He has a huge onus on him, but he's the franchise player. He's the face of that franchise, and we've got to face it. Guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, some of the game's elite, they make stars out of their wide receivers. You know, there's certainly been a couple years that Brees or Manning or Brady have played, you know, with some top-notch receivers. But for the most part, if you look at the wide receivers they've played with over the years, these guys have been late-round draft picks. You know, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Wes Welker, Eric Decker, Marcus Colston, Lance Moore. I mean, come on, let's be honest here. You know, Tom Brady, you know, come on, Julian Edelman, even Gronkowski. You know, these guys were nobodies. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm not diminishing what they did in college, but these weren't, Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, your top end talent wide receivers. And so it was really the preparation, the film study, putting the time in, working with these receivers before and after practice, all the intangibles, being team leaders, getting these guys set up in a position to succeed. So I'm just anxious to see, how Cam Newton handles the transition, and can he handle the responsibility of really elevating the play of his players around him, because that's what we have seen from the best QBs in the NFL. Next, Robert Griffin III had an outstanding season as a rookie in the NFL. Obviously, injuries kind of hindered his play last year. He's back fully healthy. He has a plethora of weapons around him with Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Andre Roberts, Josh Reed, and Alfred Morris running the football. He now has Mike Zimmerman as his head coach and offensive coordinator. So I'm really anxious to see if Robert Griffin III is going to be able to elevate his play even beyond what he did as a rookie. And if he's learned his lesson, this guy has got to learn to slide. He's got to learn to avoid taking big hits. So I'm just really anxious to see, if it's really sunk in. Is he going to stop playing that reckless style of football and really utilize, the weapons that he has around him, because he certainly doesn't need to do an awful lot. He can improvise with his legs. I mean, I think he's in a perfect position to succeed. I think he can be an excellent player, quarterback in fantasy football, but we've got to see it on the field. We've seen a lot of times where on paper the stars are there, the names are there, but it doesn't automatically translate over to the football field. Next, Arian Foster. This guy was coming into last season outside of injuries as really a top 5 overall pick in fantasy drafts. Well, he suffered a back injury. This guy has missed a lot of time in training camp due to a hamstring and calf issues, which some people are saying is due to that back surgery. The other key factor here is there's a new offensive coordinator in town in Houston now. And so it's going to be really interesting to see if Arian Foster can get back to being the Pro Bowl player that he was, gaining 1,300 to 1,400 yards and 13 to 14 touchdowns. I'm very interested to see how that shakes out. He's one of the players that is really difficult to gauge where he's going to get drafted this year. I think once we can see him in the preseason, that'll certainly help our expectations out. But you don't want to have a situation like last year where you spent a first round pick on this guy and he missed the majority of the season. Another guy, Jeremy Maclin, Philadelphia Eagles. Now look, we all know that Maclin's talented. We all know that this guy runs in the 4.3 speed range. We know that when he's been in the lineup, he's been productive. But we also know he's been injured more than he's been on the football field. So yeah, certainly have to take that into consideration. And then he's got some big shoes to fill. Now, Deshaun Jackson had over 1,300 receiving yards last year. He's going to Washington now. Now, I don't think that Philadelphia is going to expect for Maclin to to come in and receive for over 1,300 yards. I think they brought over Darren Sproles from the New Orleans Saints to kind of help make up for the loss of Deshaun Jackson's production. But if Jackson was able to do it, I don't see any reason why Maclin can't, unless Sproles is going to kind of cut into his place. So I think Jeremy Maclin is a very interesting fantasy football prospect this year. Haven't seen a lot of him in the preseason, but I think he's a guy you certainly want to keep your eye on. He's one of my boom or bust guys. He's either going to give you big time production or he's going to be a waste of time. Next, Keenan Allen of the San Diego Chargers. Look, this is a guy who I'm telling you, you don't want to sleep on, okay? Now, I think where you're going to be able to draft him is going to be excellent, and I'm confident that he can give you number one wide receiver type stats. So if you're able to, the first couple rounds, I think Allen probably be going around that fourth or fifth round. I mean, the likes of Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson, and Brandon Marshall, those guys are going to be going first. But Keenan Allen is a top 10 talent at wide receiver, and I think that this is a guy who a lot of people are going to kind of browse over, and I think that if you get him, you're going to end up with a steal. He was the only rookie wide receiver last year to have over 1,000 yards, and that Phillip Rivers is going to be looking to throw the football a lot. Allen actually had a touchdown yesterday in a preseason game against Seattle, so I think Keenan Allen is a guy that when we come back and talk about him and the Chargers during the season, he's going to be a player that a lot of you are going to take my advice and pick him up and be very satisfied. There's going to be a lot of people who call in and email and Facebook and Twitter us on the show and say, you know what, I should have listened to you. I let this guy slip away, and he's paying big time dividends. Next, Tony Gonzalez. Now, we know that Gonzalez, in much respect, I mean, this guy was a consummate professional. This guy is a future Hall of Famer, first ballot without question. And he was with the Atlanta Falcons. My question is about Matt Ryan, the quarterback for the Falcons. I'm anxious to see with no Gonzalez how it affects his production. Now, without question, he still has Roddy White and Julio Jones, arguably the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL. But the reason that offense was able to click so much and hit on high cylinders, the reason that teams could not double cover Jones and Roddy White is because Tony Gonzalez was there. Gonzalez was also a huge target in the red zone. So I'm anxious to see, with Tony Gonzalez no longer there, that was Matt Ryan's number one security blanket, how that affects the play of Matt Ryan. Now, last year, without Julio Jones for 11 games, Roddy White wasn't healthy until the last 4 or 5 games of the season. Ryan was still able to pass for over 4,500 yards and 26 TDs. Definitely the 17 interceptions and the 4 lost fumbles hurt his stats, but I'm just really interested to see how Matty Ice is going to distribute the football and how potent this Falcons offense is going to be minus Tony Gonzalez. Next, we're talking about Dwayne Bowe. I'm extremely disappointed in Bowe. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to try to color code it or fancy it up for you. I'm flat out disgusted with this guy. How do you go from leading the NFL with 15 touchdown passes in 2011, then 2012 and 13, your numbers drop off by about 75%? I mean, this guy has done nothing, okay? This guy's a big contract, and you know what? Maybe that's it. We see it happen in sports a lot. A player is performing at a high level, they get paid a big contract, and their play takes a tremendous hit. Now, I don't understand it. Out in Kansas City, There's no other wide receivers, okay? It's not like he has, Dez Bryant or Demaryius Thomas or some other big-time receiver on the other side. He's supposed to be the guy, okay? You got Alex Smith there at quarterback, and you got Jamal Charles. This guy should be the #1 target out there, yet there's so many games where he just does not get the football. Now, he's going to miss a game, okay? He got caught with some marijuana, so he's going to miss one game. I don't see how that benefits him any. And then word coming out of Kansas City this week is that one of his fingers is really messed up. That's been hindering him from catching the football. He's been dropping a lot of balls in training camp. So I'm just interested to see, is this guy ever going to round back into form, or was 2011, that version of Dwayne Bowe, is that done? Is that the last we've seen? I mean, coming into 2012, Bowe was going, amongst the top 10 to 12 wide receivers. Right now, he's a joke. I don't even think he's getting drafted in fantasy football leagues. So I think that's really sad. We'll have to keep an eye and see if he does anything that makes us have an interest in him again. Next, Andre Ellington. Now look, this is a player. He's a running back for the Arizona Cardinals, okay? And his coach, Bruce Arians, has already said he's going to be a bell cow. This guy is going to be the workhorse for this Arizona Cardinals offense this year, because he's going to be running the football, but he also is good at catching out of the backfield. He actually can line up at wide receiver. He runs routes and has hands that are that good. Now, there was an article this week on NFL.com where Chris Wessling said that Jamal Charles, the running back from the Kansas City Chiefs, that's how Arizona's planning to use him. And you've been hearing a lot of fantasy football experts saying that, Ellington, he's going to put up big numbers. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. Let me tell you something right now, okay? Until we see otherwise, he's still a borderline #2 flex running back, okay? We have to see it first, okay? We can't go off of, let me tell you something about fantasy football, okay? As much as you love having a player on your team who's going to get a ton of touches, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, he's going to get the ball thrown his way a lot, he has to produce, okay? And Andre Ellington, I like him a lot. Certainly showed explosion in the running game, had an 80-yard touchdown run last year. I like the dual threat. He can certainly catch the ball out of the backfield. But using him like Jamal Charles is the only comparison. Putting up Jamal Charles type numbers, we're talking, 1,900 all-purpose yards. Jamal Charles led the NFL with 19 total TDs last year. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. First of all, we have to see if Andre Ellington can handle that workload for an entire season. Jamal Charles, that was his 6th season last year. Prior to that, he had 3,000-yard seasons rushing underneath his belt. Okay, this guy is proven. All right, Andre Ellington as well. Look, Jamal Charles plays in the AFC West with weak defenses like Denver, with weak defenses like San Diego and the Raiders. This guy, Andre Ellington, he's going to be facing 3 top 10 defenses in his own division for 6 games this season. Okay, so it's not going to be as easy. Like I said, I like Ellington a lot, but I'm trying to advise people, don't get ahead of yourself. Now, granted, if we see something in the preseason, okay, that raises our eyebrows, he's really out there killing it, then yeah, maybe we can bump him up to a legit #2 running back. But I have to see it first, okay? This guy he doesn't even have a 1,000-yard rushing season under his belt. Last year, he couldn't even beat out Rashad Mendenhall for the starting spot out there. So as much as I like Andre Ellington, I'm cool on him. He'll certainly be a guy that I'll be picking up in later rounds. I'm not going to jump the gun and get ahead of myself listening to all these analysts on ESPN and NFL Network in fantasy. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Mark my word for it. Get Andre Ellington in about the late 4th to 5th round. That is where you're going to see his value this year. Next in line, Tom Brady. Look, I'm just going to be brief. Last year, Brady, from a fantasy football standpoint, was very shaky. His overall numbers at the end of the year, excellent. 4,343 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions, with a bunch of rookies, through a plethora of injuries. Those numbers were excellent. But in fantasy football, Brady was a bust. Brady was pretty much the third quarterback being taken in drafts last year after Peyton Manning and Drew Brees. Let me tell you, Tom Brady only had 2 games last year out of 16 where he threw for more than 3 TDs. Brady had 8 games where he only threw 1 or less touchdowns, and another 6 games with only 2 touchdowns. We're not accustomed to seeing that from Tom Brady. Now, I'm going to tell you the good news, and that's why I'm talking about this. Forget last year. When it comes to fantasy football, throw the prior year in the trash, okay? Let me tell you something about Tom Brady. The fire burns inside of this guy. This guy is a winner. He's a professional, and he may not be verbal about it, but you better believe that he hears when people are saying he's not the same quarterback he used to be, okay? When people are putting Drew Brees in front of him, and rightfully so, Brees certainly puts up the numbers. But let me tell you, if Tom Brady has his weapons healthy, let me name them all for you. Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, Kimbrell Tompkins, Aaron Dobson, Shane Vereen, Rob Gronkowski. And that's my point when I talked earlier about Cam Newton. I didn't name one player coming out of college who was drafted in the first round or who was rated high on scouts' boards. But it is Tom Brady who makes these players great. You see what I'm saying? When I was talking about Cam Newton stepping his level of play up. And so if Tom Brady has those guys that I just mentioned healthy this year, please believe it, Tom Brady will be a steal in this year's draft. A lot of people are predicting him and projecting him to go in later rounds. Let me tell you firsthand, get Tom Brady. This guy is going to come back this year. The 4,300 yards, I don't have a problem with, but please expect him to be back up towards his normal 35 to 40 TD passes. Tom Brady, don't sleep on him. Go ahead and grab Brady. Don't get caught up in what happened last year. Next in line, Brandon Cooks. Love this guy. He's a rookie out of Oregon State, and let me tell you, he's set up for success. You know why? As much as we hear about Sammy Watkins, and rightfully so, you know, the star wide receiver who came out of Clemson, he's over in Buffalo, that he's been getting all the talk. Now, Cooks has certainly been on the radar, but he's set up for success out of all the rookie quarterbacks because he's playing with Drew Brees. When you look at this Saints offense, okay, Jimmy Graham, without question, is a top target. They have Marcus Colston, who's been there for a while, very good wide receiver. Outside of those 2 guys, Kenny Stills is next on the depth chart. He's the start number 2 receiver. He's in his 2nd year, and the Saints lost Darren Sproles in free agency to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Sproles was averaging 77 catches a year while he was in New Orleans. He's gone now. They've got to find a place to replace that, and I think Brandon Cooks is the guy who's going to step in. They're going to be looking to get him the ball a lot in space. This guy is very quick, very good playmaker, very dynamic in open field. Keep your eyes on Brandon Cooks. He could be a fantasy sleeper on your team and become an excellent flex play. Next in line, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Let's take it out to Green Bay. Now, we're not talking about Rodgers' talent at all. Still one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. Pinpoint accurate, can get it done scrambling, has great pocket presence. We know this guy, when he gets hot, there may not be a better quarterback in the business, but I think expectations should be tapered just a little bit. Now, look, the past couple years, when Rodgers was putting up the huge numbers, Green Bay didn't have the running attack that they have now. They were doing a lot of 5 wide receiver sets with Donald Driver, Jermichael Finley, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, and Greg Jennings. Now Jennings is gone, Finley is gone, Driver is gone. Okay, now they did draft Jared Boykin. He's a nice wide receiver. I certainly expect for the Packers to go a lot of 3 wide receiver set. But Eddie Lacy is there running that football now. So now the Packers have the running back they've been looking for, a power running game to take some of the pressure off Rodgers. So my question is this: how much of a hit is Aaron Rodgers' numbers going to take? In Rodgers' last full season, he had 32 TD passes. The year before that, 45 TD passes to 39 TD passes to only 6 interceptions. Now, I certainly think with Eddie Lacy there is going to make Rodgers more efficient. He'll be more deadly in play action, and defenses are going to have to pick their poison. But Aaron Rodgers is still rated as a top 5 fantasy football quarterback I'm wondering when the season ends, is that going to be the case? Because there's a lot of other quarterbacks out there who have just as many weapons and don't have as good of a running game, potentially could put up bigger stats. So I'm real interested to see what type of numbers Aaron Rodgers puts up this year. Next, let's take it over to Victor Cruz. Let's move it up to New York for a minute. Now, Cruz is a guy who, over the past couple years, have been putting up excellent fantasy stats. But his success had been attributed to him being in the slot position. He was pretty much outside of Wes Welker. He had become the best slot wide receiver in the NFL. The reason he was able to do that is because on the outside, he had wide receiver Hakeem Nicks, and on the other side, he had wide receiver Mario Manningham. Well, Manningham is back with the team, but he's not his old self. He's on the tail end of his career. I don't even think he's slated to be getting a lot of playing time. And Hakeem Nicks left this offseason to go to Indianapolis. So, number one, if Cruz is not lining up in the slot where he excelled so much for his first couple years in the NFL, he's going to be drawing the top defensive back. He's going to be the main focus of defensive coordinators now. So I'm wondering, especially with a new set of skill players for the New York Giants, and we've seen Eli Manning struggle last year a lot, I'm wondering just how effective Victor Cruz can be. This is something that's definitely worth tracking because I think he's another boom or bust player. He's certainly a guy who's going to get a lot of targets. Eli Manning is going to look to get him the football early and often and an awful lot. But like I said, Cruz a lot of times in that slot was drawing matchups from linebackers and safeties. That is not going to be the case anymore. And then that's why I say it's interesting to see how much he's going to line up in the slot. If he's going to be a slot receiver, I still think he can benefit, but I think he's going to play a lot more outside. Victor Cruz certainly had been a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver coming into last year. This year, that is certainly not the case. Going to be real interesting to see where he goes in this year's fantasy football drafts. Another guy, Mike Wallace of the Miami Dolphins. Now it's going to be interesting to see what Wallace. He was putting up big time production for the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple years ago. Came over to Miami last year, got off to a slow start. Here's another guy I'm talking about. Landed that big contract. His play dropped off some. I don't know if it was concentration. I don't know if he just wasn't fully focused. Now he did step his game up towards the end of the last year, but certainly had too many games of not showing up to be the number one wide receiver making $10-11 million a year. And so it's going to be interesting to see if he can rebound. Now, to his credit, his stats could have been a little bit better. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill had to do a better job of hitting Wallace on the deep ball. There were a lot of plays I've seen last year where Wallace was wide open deep and Tannehill just flat out threw a bad ball. Either overthrew him or threw the football in a place to where Wallace couldn't get it, primarily out of bounds. And so I'm anxious to see if Mike Wallace can get back to a 1,200-yard, 10-touchdown wide receiver. He's certainly a guy who was getting a lot of consideration in fantasy football drafts last year. He's got some real mixed emotions coming in on him. Quick shout out to Zach Mettenberg, the rookie quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. Look, I know it's only preseason, but the Titans drafted him because they're not sold on Jake Locker. They're probably not going to bring Locker back next year unless he has a Pro Bowl, just really kills it this year. Not only in fantasy football, in real football. Zach Mettenberg is a rookie quarterback from LSU. When by the time the scouts got through with the top 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft, 2014 draft for the NFL, Mettenberg's name was on the list. Yesterday in the preseason game against the Saints, he completed 20 out of 25 passes for 269 yards and 2 TDs. This is not right now fantasy relevant, but just had to give him a quick shout out because I think that the Titans may have found their future franchise quarterback in Zach Mettenberg. Let's get back to some fantasy real quick before we finish up the show. Nick Foles last year had the 3rd best season for a quarterback in NFL history. 27 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. Obviously this year I don't expect for any quarterback to only throw 2 interceptions, but I think that Foles can certainly improve on those 27 TD passes. He's a guy who you're going to be able to pick up in fantasy drafts in an excellent position. You should be able to stack 3 or 4 top tier players in front of him and then grab Foles. I think Nick Foles is an excellent pickup. I'm telling you, he's a sleeper pick. put him on your draft board. If you can get him at a good position with some nice skilled players around him, he'll pay big time dividends. Ryan Matthews of the San Diego Chargers was able to stay healthy for the first time in his career last year. Played all 16 games, had over 1,200 yards rushing, 8 TDs. In the offseason, the Chargers brought over Donald Brown, the hard-running running back from the Indianapolis Colts. And then Danny Woodhead is used a lot when Phillip Rivers likes to go shotgun. So it's going to be interesting to see, can Matthews stay healthy for 2 straight seasons, which he's yet to do. But prior, last year was his 4th year. His 3 prior years had made it through a full 16-game slate. And then if he is healthy, I'm interested to see how much his production takes a hit. Because if Danny Woodhead is going to get the time he normally gets, and Donald Brown is going to get some carries, Ryan Matthews, you want to be careful. You want to watch in the preseason to see how he's being used. I think his draft stock has taken a little bit of a hit. Last but not least, we got Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he's in a situation to succeed. He's playing opposite Vincent Jackson. They drafted Evans. He's a 6'5" wide receiver from Texas A&M. They drafted him specifically to help bolster their passing attack. He's a good route runner, has real good hands. I'm excited to see him. He's another guy, like I said, Sammy Watkins, rightfully so, has been getting all the accolades, but I think that Mike Evans is another sleeper wide receiver that we want to watch out for in the preseason, who certainly has a chance to come out and be successful this year. All right, that's going to wrap up another great edition of the Exporter Sports Talk Show. Again, we're on Raw Radio Live each and every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m., so make sure to tune in to the show. You want to make sure to catch us on Twitter at NFLExporter. That's NFLExporter, and Raw Radio 1. All right, that does it. I appreciate everybody for tuning in today. It's the NFL Exporter signing out 1100. I'll catch you next week.